Welcome back, my kindred spirits, to the Dark Folio, your eerie little coffee break where we explore folklore, ghost stories, curious histories, and the mysteries that slip between the cracks of the everyday. Tonight's Dark Ledger file takes us back to the very beginning of American Spiritualism, to three sisters whose innocent childhood pranks, stage shows, and lifelong secrets would change an entire nation. They sparked a religious movement, captivated scientists, inspired séances in homes from Boston to London, and left behind a mystery we still argue about today. This is the story of Maggie, Kate, and Leah Fox, the girls who convinced the world the dead could speak. So settle in, dim the lamps, and let's open the ledger. Let's set the scene. A cold March night in 1848. A tiny, drafty farmhouse in Hydesville, New York, wrapped completely in darkness. Two young sisters lay awake in their shared bed, listening. A sharp, deliberate rap, silence, and then another. And then 11-year-old Kate whispers into the darkness, a challenge. Do as I do. Count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Five knocks in perfect response to their whispered questions. And just like that, the world tilts. Because if the dead can answer, what else might they demand? The official story is simple. On March 31st, 1848, Maggie, who was 14, and Kate, who was 11, began communicating with a spirit they called Mr. Splitfoot, a playful nickname for the devil himself. This all started innocently enough with the girls telling their mom about it and proving to her that they weren't making it up by communicating with the entity right before her eyes. The knocks came from walls, from furniture, from nowhere at all. The parents, needing outside verification, brought in a neighbor. According to some accounts, the spirit was asked questions and answered with knocks, the correct number every time. By the next morning, it was all the town could talk about. Neighbors flocked in. Some reports say as many as 500 people came through that house the next day. A code was established, questions were asked, and the knocks kept answering. But here's what rarely gets mentioned. The haunted house, well, it already had a reputation. The Hydesville cottage was believed to be haunted before the Fox family rented it and moved in. Strange sounds, uneasy feelings, cold spots. The girls didn't spark the rumors, they simply amplified them. Now, the parents were concerned for their daughters. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? They truly believed that their young teen and preteen daughters were actively communicating with some otherworldly being. The parents thought that by splitting the girls up, they would break the bond that they had with this Mr. Splitfoot. The girls were sent to live with family. Kate went with their married brother David, and Maggie went with Leah, their older adult sister. But the spirit sounds followed them, and devotees followed them to seances at David and Leah's houses. Now, Leah, some reports say, was divorced from an abusive ex-husband who had abandoned her and their daughter. She was giving piano lessons to support them, and she sometimes claimed to be a widow for better social respect. Leah listened to Maggie about what had happened and how interested everyone was in the conversations with the dead, and she saw the potential, spiritual and financial, and within months she took charge of the girls' public appearances and organized the very first paid seances in American history. On November the 14th, 1849, Leah booked the largest gathering place in Rochester, the Corinthian Hall, and charged 25 cents for a seat. Nearly 400 people packed in. The audience was filled with all types, believers, skeptics, and people there for pure entertainment. When Maggie appeared on the stage, everyone was shocked that this young, innocent, 15-year-old girl was talking with the dead. It had to be real, right? And now, Leah was also able to make contact with the spirits, and she performed right alongside Maggie. Now, in my research, I did find a few discrepancies. In some reports, it says that Maggie and Kate were both with Leah at the Corinthian Hall. In other reports, it was just Maggie, and Kate was off doing a séance somewhere else. All of the research does show that after the show, Maggie and Leah allowed themselves to be subjected to tests for proof of their validity. The following days, they followed up with public séances and more tests from as many as 3 different committees. One was an all-female committee, which took the girls into a room and had them disrobe so they could search them for proof and devices. Now remember, Leah was an adult, but poor Maggie was only 15, and if Kate was there, well, she was only 12. The reports say that Maggie was so mortified that she cried until the women allowed them to dress again. After all of this scrutiny, no one could definitively answer if they were being told the truth or if they were being conned. The girls were no longer talking to Mr. Splitfoot. No, that quickly transitioned to them talking to dead relatives, passing on comforting words and telling loved ones exactly what they surely wanted to hear. And that rapid change, that rapid professionalization is the key. These 15 and 12-year-old girls had a following, much like today's child stars. And I want you to keep that in mind, that these were children, because once the Fox sisters began traveling, they didn't start a trend, they started a movement. As luck would have it, it was just the right timing. American Spiritualism spread like wildfire. Newspapers printed séance scripts, churches condemned it, scientists debated it, and well-known people like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Mary Todd Lincoln supported the sisters and the movement. Others, like Harry Houdini, thought they were frauds, and people who felt lost, lonely, or hungry for answers, well, they gathered around tables and waited for knocks of their own. Within a few years, the movement had grown so large that entire communities formed around it. And there are spiritualist towns that still exist. Lilydale, New York, is the largest spiritualist community in the world. It was founded in 1879 and is still active today. Think quiet cottages, mediums with office hours, and thousands of visitors seeking messages from the other side. And there's also Cassadaga, Florida, founded in 1894 by a Lilydale spiritualist whose spirit guide allegedly led him to that exact spot known as the psychic capital of the world. These towns grew directly from the Fox sisters' influence. Not bad for a pair of teenagers who started with a ghost in their bedroom. And yes, these sisters eventually did perform. They moved from private parlors to theaters and auditoriums, conducting seances in front of hundreds. In April of 1850, the girl's mom was back in the picture. Not surprising, considering that the money was coming in, and she took the girls on their first public tour, Albany, Troy, and New York City. Leah also continued her seances. Sometimes they all worked together, sometimes separate. And here's the key. They didn't treat them like cheap parlor acts. They created an atmosphere. Darkened rooms, solemn voices, respectful silence. These weren't spooky Halloween shows. They were closer to religious services, with an edge of wonder. Now, if you've been listening to the Dark Folio for a while, you'll remember our episode on Sarah Winchester and her strange labyrinthian mansion in California, the Winchester Mystery House. If you haven't heard it, go back and check it out. You might recall her seance room and the mysterious cabinet she used for communicating with the spirits. Here's the tie-in that most people miss. Spiritualists like Sarah didn't invent these practices from thin air. They borrowed them directly from the movement the Fox sisters helped create. The dim rooms, the private communions, the idea that messages needed controlled, sacred space. Even the cabinet, a concept used by mediums to focus spirit activity, came from techniques popularized decades earlier. Sarah Winchester wasn't copying a fad. She was following a tradition that the Fox sisters made mainstream. But what happened to the sisters after the explosion of spiritualism? Well, by the early 1850s, fame was wearing on Maggie, and the knocks that once felt mysterious now felt like chains. And this brings us to the moment that changed her life. There's a part of Maggie's story that rarely gets spotlight, but it shaped almost everything that came after. And his name was Dr. Elijah Kent Kane, Arctic explorer, national hero, scientist, and more than a decade older than Maggie. She was around 20. He was in his early 30s, handsome, wealthy, admired, a very good family, and very opposed to spiritualism. He believed the Fox sisters were being exploited. He believed the knocks were harmful, morally and emotionally, and he believed he could save Maggie from it all. He paid for her schooling. He encouraged her to convert to Catholicism. He begged her to abandon mediumship altogether. And Maggie tried. She loved him desperately. They married in a simple, secret ceremony in 1856. He loved her. He tried to save her. But in February of 1857, barely a year after they were married, Kane died suddenly in Havana, Cuba, at just 37 years old, and his death devastated her. His strong moral disapproval of their work lingered like a ghost, and she couldn't shake it. She claimed the Kane name. She did convert to Catholicism, and for the most part, she gave up the performances. Many historians believe this grief played a direct role in Maggie's later confession on a New York stage in 1888, where she denounced her entire career. Whether she was telling the truth that night or simply trying to honor Kane's memory is still debated, but it came from a wound that never healed. By the late 1880s, the movement that they helped build was booming, and the Fox sisters were struggling. Maggie had settled into a life of poverty and alcoholism. Kate lasted a little longer, continuing performances. She went to London, married a lawyer and a spiritualist writer named Henry Jenkin, and had 2 sons. But Jenkin died in 1881, and Kate returned to America in 1885, where she also took up alcohol. In 1888, Kate was arrested, and her sons were removed from her care. Maggie said spiritualism was to blame for their lives and their mistakes. And then came the confession. A reporter offered $1,500 if they would expose their methods. On October 21st, 1888, Maggie stepped onto a stage at the New York Academy of Music before an audience of 2,000 people and publicly announced the truth. She cracked the joints in her toes. She demonstrated the raps right there on stage. She said it had all been a trick. It had started as a prank on their mother, but that Leah had made them continue the act to bring in the money. Of course, Leah never addressed the claims. Some believed Maggie. Some thought she'd been pressured. Others insisted she was lying now, not back then. A year later, in November of 1889, she recanted the confession. She claimed it was because the spirits told her to recant it. Some say it was simply because she desperately needed the money, but she never truly reclaimed her fame. Leah remarried, and she died in November of 1890, still defending the movement. Kate and Maggie died in New York City in 1892 and 1893, living out their last years, struggling with alcoholism, in poverty, and relative obscurity. But here's a twist that still sends a chill down the spine of history. Years later in 1904, when the Hydesville house was being renovated, construction workers found bones buried in the cellar, exactly where the Fox sisters had said a body would be found decades before. Now, a physician who examined the remains found that they consisted of random bits of bone, including animal bones, chicken bones. And there was not enough evidence to definitively prove the murdered peddler, but it was enough to force people to ask, one last time, who was doing the rapping on all those dark nights long ago. The Fox sisters didn't just spark a movement, they reshaped how America thought about death, hope, and the thin veil between worlds. Were they frauds? Were they mediums? Were they young girls who stumbled into a mystery too big to escape. Maybe they were all three. There is a lot to unpack about the Fox sisters and the spiritualism movement, and I've just briefly touched on it tonight. But we do close their ledger tonight with the same question they left behind. If the dead truly wanted to speak, would we even know how to listen? I'm May, and this has been the Dark Folio, the Dark Ledger File. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please follow, like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen. I would really appreciate it. It helps this little spooky show find more curious ears in the dark. Until next time, darklings, my kindred spirits, keep your candles lit and listen closely. You never know who might be knocking.